This cannot make the show.
Okay, yeah, I promise I won't put it on the show. Fingers crossed.
The hidden poop, maybe.
90% of this show is going to be hidden poop. You know what? Fuck it. This whole episode's going to be hidden poop. But at the same time, it's going to be like a really long hidden poop.
Yeah, sorry I was late. I didn't know you were all waiting on me.
We weren't.
Would you rather fuck Ellen DeGeneres?
Yes.
No.
Or...
Well, our first difference, Tom.
That's how you tell the difference between the two of us. Who would fuck Ellen DeGeneres? Oh, the Imaginarianation of Dr. Prognosis.
No one's even heard of that movie.
We are the Huffington Post of podcasts.
You know who did that exact thing to me, V? The lead singer of Five Finger Death Punch.
Did he really?
That's a band?
Yeah, I was drinking with him at a bar, and
How many
he went out.
fingers is that band?
5 fingers.
So you were drinking with him at a bar?
Yeah, because they had just gotten done with the show, and everyone left, but there was a bar attached to the venue on base. And I was like, why is everyone leaving? They're almost definitely going to be in the bar. So I walked over to the bar, and Ivan Moody was sitting there, and I sat next to him. We had a couple drinks, and he went out for a cigarette. Then I followed him out, and I was like, hey, can I bum a cigarette off you? And he's like, no, I don't have any. Or he said, no, this is my last one or something as he was pulling. Like, he pulled out a full pack, and he pulled one out. He's like, no, this is my last one. And
That's awesome.
I was like, all right. And then later on, after he had a few more drinks and I had a few more drinks, he's like, hey, listen, man, I gotta come clean with you. I had more cigarettes. I just don't like giving them away. And I was like, that's okay. I don't smoke anyways. I just wanted to say I bummed a cigarette off Ivan Moody.
That's awesome. You know, there's always a bit of wordplay that you can do with, like, if someone asks you if you have an extra cigarette, you know, they don't give you an extra cigarette when you buy a pack. There's 20 in a pack, not 21. So if somebody asks you for an extra one, you just say, sorry, man, they only gave me 20, not 21. So there's no extra cigarette here, bro.
No, this is a normal
Sorry
pack.
for that.
I hate to tell you.
Yes, hate to break it to you. You know.
Remember when I told Clay Aiken, or who was that? Who was that musician?
No, not Trace Adkins. Who?
It was Trace
Corey
Atkins,
Feldman.
Wasn't it? No, it wasn't Corey Feldman. It was. Oh man, now I got to look him up because I told a country singer.
Clay Aiken.
No, it wasn't a little nerdy guy. It was the huge guy. Yeah, it was Trace Adkins. So remember when we were in Baghdad, or not Baghdad, when we were up in Spiker, and Trace Adkins came to Spiker.
Trace Atkins.
And so when in our hangar, we had my supply room was right next to the little satellite DFAC. Yeah, go ahead, go nuts. He was right next to, or it was right next to our supply room, the satellite DFAC, and they had written on the board, "Welcome Trace Atkins to the Echo Company, dining facility or whatever." So I wrote on the dry erase board, "Welcome Trace Atkins to the Delta Company supply room," like he had any business there. And but he came through when we were out at the SSA or whatever. And then we came back and my doorknob was broken on the supply room. And I saw him out there and a bunch of people were like gathered around him. And I didn't know who the guy was. I knew he was a country singer. I don't listen to his music though. So I go over to him and everyone's shaking his hand. Hey, Trace Atkins. Hey, Trace Atkins. So I shake his hand and I say, "Hey, Trace Atkins, I know it was you who broke my doorknob." And because like I thought, he saw the sign and he was like, "Oh, cool, I'm welcome here. I can come in here." So, but then he like ripped the doorknob off because it was locked. And so I'm like, "Hey, Trace Atkins, I know it was you that broke my doorknob." And he like leaned in while he was shaking my hand and got right in my face. But he was like taller than me, so he had to like lean in and kind of crouch down a little bit. And he goes, "I didn't break your fucking doorknob, Miller." And like that was.
Did he really say that?
That is an honest to God true story. He said, "I'm breaking fucking
awesome.
doorknob, Miller," and I was like, "Yeah, whatever." And that was the end of the discussion. Like I shook his hand, and then like we went and then he like continued talking to the people that were there, and then I went back to the supply room and I went back to work, and I don't remember like anything else beyond that. But yeah, like
you
my
should, like, never
stories
let
with
him live that down.
my stories with celebrities are always like, no, I still have some. My stories with celebrities are always like really interesting. Like one time I met John Hammond in a bathroom in a rest stop.
Like the John Hammond?
The John Hammond, yeah.
The Jurassic Park John Hammond?
No, the football guy.
This is a good story, actually. John Madden.
There was no one time I went. I was super tired, and I was driving cross country from Wisconsin to Pennsylvania. I'll tell the story in like the briefest of terms. I was driving from Wisconsin to Pennsylvania overnight. Like I left at like 8:00 at night, and I was just gonna drive straight through the night. It was the middle of the night. It was a snowstorm right on the other side of where I was at. You know, east of where I was at, and I was kind of following it the whole way. And I stopped at a rest stop, and I was just dog tired. And I'm at a urinal, and this dude walks up to the urinal kind of down the way from me. And I look at him, and he looks just like John Hammond from Jurassic Park. And I look at him.
You know what's so funny? I don't mean to interrupt. What's so funny about this to me is the guy's name isn't John Hammond. I mean, in the movie, his name is the actor's name is Richard Attenborough.
But I look over at him, and I'm wearing sunglasses at the time because I was so tired, and I was just like so beyond like the point of where you care if you live or die when you're driving. And I was just like wearing my sunglasses and a baseball and a Yankees cap or whatever. And I look over at him, like eyes probably half open, and I said, "What's up, John Madden?" And then he looks at me, and he doesn't get it, obviously.
So wait a second. Are we talking about John Hammond or John Madden?
And that's the story, or that's the joke.
Yeah, that's
like he looked like John Hammond from Jurassic Park, and that's what I was thinking. But when I said it, I said, "What's up, John Madden?" And like the dude looked at me like I was crazy, and then he goes and he washes his hands, and I'm still pissing because it's been a long trip. And all of a sudden I realize as he's walking out the door, I'm like, "Oh, I meant John Hammond." And so I'm yelling at this guy as he's walking out the door, "I meant John Hammond." and like the dude like looks back, and then he looks back out the door and walks away out of my life forever. But like that's one of my famous people stories that I met. The times that I met a famous person.
Yeah.
I love how you tell those stories as your favorites, but the time you met Vince Vaughn was probably a much cooler story.
I like the John Cena one. The John Cena one is.
You met Vince Vaughn?
I've met all sorts of. I'm telling you, I've met so many funny people, like so many celebrities, and the stories are always really funny. John
he didn't
Cena,
just meet Vince Vaughn.
I partied
he
with
hung
Vince
out
Vaughn.
with Vince Vaughn.
I partied with Vince Vaughn for a long time, and I blacked out drunk partying with Vince Vaughn one time.
Oh.
But I'll tell you the story about John Cena because that's one of my favorites. So
Yeah, that's my favorite too.
when you go to a celebrity comes to the PX when you're on base or whatever, they have like they warn you in advance. They're like, "Hey, so and so is coming to the PX on such and such a day," and I was like, "Oh, John Cena. I don't know who the fuck John Cena is, but my sister likes John Cena." Dustin's taken the microphone off of the stand, and now he's holding it like he's gonna karaoke. Turn around,
Baby, every time I hear it, baby.
None of those words were correct. But moving on. So they warn you. They say, "Hey, John Cena's going to be here." And I'm like, "I don't know who that guy is, but I know my sister likes John Cena. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to be in Iraq for her birthday. What I'll do is I'll get her signature on a CD or whatever." Because he was making CDs at the time. Yeah. He was a rapper at the time, as well as a WWE superstar. But
an awesome all-around dude. An all-around awesome dude.
Super guy.
I mean, let's be honest. We support John Cena here
at this time. I will say John Cena is if not the coolest, he is one of the coolest guys in the world, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. But But yeah, I didn't know who he was, and I was just going to get her a CD, have it signed, and I was going to send it to her and say, "Hey, I know I'm going to be out of the country for your birthday, and this is my first deployment. I'm going to be out of the country. I'm not going to be able to wish you a happy birthday. I want to get you the CD, and it's your birthday present. Consider it your birthday present." So
John Cena CD.
So yeah, well,
that's so funny. Just thinking about that alone.
Cena, so.
John Cena CD.
So
it doesn't matter.
But no, so I show up at the PX after work. It's late. It's like 4 or 5 o'clock at night, and I just gotten off of work. And I'm like, I gotta hurry up and get to John Cena's autograph. So I show up at the PX. The line wraps all the way around the inside of the PX, and I'm like, there is no way, because he was supposed to be done by like 5:30 or whatever. I said, there's no way I'm gonna make it to see him and get his autograph. I'm like, Rachel's gonna be so bummed, so on and so forth. And then I get in there, and I'm waiting in line for a while, and it's about the time that he was supposed to end, and the guy comes on the speaker on the PA system, and it's whoever runs the PA system, like the manager or whatever, and he goes, ladies and gentlemen at the local Fort Hood Post Exchange, unfortunately I have to tell you that John Cena's autographing session will only last until 5:30. So, and then all of a sudden you hear the mic feedback of, like, you know, like the whine, like the classic, like when you watch a movie and somebody snatches the microphone, like you hear that, and then you hear John Cena get on the microphone, and he goes, "Yo, this is your boy John Cena. Fucking, if you in line right now, you're gonna get an autograph." And like, I'm like, did he just say the F word over the microphone at the PX?
So he said that. He said that. If you're fucking in line right now,
he said, "Yo, this is your boy John Cena. Fucking, if you in line right now," like he's not, like he's new to microphones or whatever, but that's what he said, and I was like, wow, and that's the first thing I thought was like, did he just swear over the microphone? But I was like, wow, what a good, because he said, you know, if you're in line right now, you're gonna get an autograph, I promise. He's like, I'll stay here as late as I can, you know, I'll stay here and sign autographs until the last person gets an autograph. And I'm like, wow, what a guy. And then I get up to the front of the line, and I'm like, and it was moving pretty quick, so I'm like, oh, he must just be busting them out real quick. I get up there, and the dude talks to me forever. Like I'm sitting there, I'm like, hey, what's the deal with the, you know, you saying word life? Because that's all I knew about the guy was he would say word life all the time.
Word life.
Yeah, so that's all I knew about him. And then I had him call my sister, like for her birthday. I'm like, well, fuck it. I was like, well, since I got you here, John, you know, like we're old college chums or whatever. I'm like, since I got you here, can you call my sister and wish her happy birthday? You know, like, since I'm gonna be out of the country, da 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 da. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I call and ended up leaving a message or whatever on the machine. And then, because she didn't answer or whatever. I'm sure she probably, you know.
How the fuck does she not answer when John Cena's calling?
How do you not answer the phone when John Cena dials? But yeah, so anyways, fast forward several years. I mean, this is like in 2004, maybe 2003, end of 2003, 2004. Fast forward to 2008, 2009, the WWE comes out to crit, like when we're out there, and you remember this, V. They come out and they do a thing.
I met Chris Jericho and Mysterio and somebody else.
Dean Malenko and John Cena was there, and when lo and behold, fucking John Cena was there. He was one of the ones that came to our hangar, and I was like, hey, you know, John Cena, you know, because at this point I know we're not like chummy or anything. I say, hey, John Cena, we've met before. He's like, yeah, I called your sister for her birthday. And I was like, wow. I was like, what a guy.
He remembered that?
Yeah, he remembered me. So I was like, wow, what a guy, John Cena. So I shook his hand. He gave me a WWE challenge coin, and, you know, we went our separate ways. But I was like, wow, what a guy. And now anytime I see him in anything, I'm like, that right there is the man that every man should aspire to be, John Cena. Like,
yeah,
a personal hero of mine.
I've heard that John Cena story like so many times as long as I've known you, and because of that story, I have like this utmost respect for John. I don't know what he does. I never watched wrestling in my entire life.
I've never seen him wrestle
based
before.
On that story.
Yeah, I've never seen him wrestle, but like he's just the guy. Like he's a hero to me personally. Yeah. Like, because I'm like, wow, like I don't remember people I met 20 minutes ago. You know what I mean? But like this dude remembered like 4 years, like a specific memory of like some dude who came through a line who looked like everyone else, I'm sure, and he was just like, yeah, I called your sister for her birthday. You know, like I was like, wow. What a dude. What a guy.
Yeah. To remember that?
So like anytime I'm telling you, like anytime I see him, I'm like blown, like he's like my old best friend ever. I'm like, wow, what a guy. Like there he is, you know, there's John Cena.
So John Cena is the fucking
There's John Cena.
Yeah, John Cena is like, honestly, if I have one personal hero in my life, if I had to narrow it down, somebody held a gun to my head and said, who is like the guy you aspire to be in your life? John Cena. It sounds funny. John Cena and the Undertaker.
The time is now!
In a spit swapping makeout match.
Look at this bottle, dude. It was half full when you started.
Or half empty, depending on how you look at it. But and then the Vince Vaughn story, not nearly as good as the I equate it to like the John Madden story, but it's as funny as that, but it's not
John
like
Hammond.
It's not like something
John
that you take
Hammond?
and you're like, wow, what a life lesson I've taken from this. But no, when I met Vince Vaughn, what happened was I had a friend when I lived in Fort Hood. I lived in a town called Harker Heights, and my neighbor right next door, I never really talked to him sober, so I didn't like get a good story, but like the dude knew Vince Vaughn because he told me that he knew Vince Vaughn, and I immediately called bullshit. I said, no way. So I was like, whatever. And he's like, I'll tell you what. He's like, I'll call Vince Vaughn right now. And I said, you do that. What's his name? Jeff Adams was his name, because his dog's name was Sam. So his dog's name was Sam Adams. But he was like...
His dog takes their last name.
But he gave his dog his last name. So
that's ridiculous.
But he was my neighbor, and he was a funny guy because he was always drunk. And he's like, I know Vince Vaughn, and I was like, bullshit. And then he tells me the story, and I'm like, yeah, I don't believe you. And then he said, I'll call Vince Vaughn right now. And I was like, okay, you do that, Jeff Adams, smart guy. So he calls Vince Vaughn, and I talked to who I thought was Vince Vaughn on the phone, and it sounded like him. And so I was like, all right, whatever. Okay, maybe you know Vince Vaughn. And then at the same time, like over the next several months, I reiterated my doubt that he knew Vince Vaughn. But one day he calls me and he's like, hey, Tom, I'm in Austin right now. Come down here. Vince Vaughn's coming to the hotel, and we're gonna party with Vince Vaughn. Yeah. And he kept calling him Vince or whatever, but he was like, we're gonna party with Vince, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm like, so my buddy Lenny was over for what we used to call White Trash Friday, where we would wear sleeveless shirts and drink PBR and smoke Marlboro 100s. Yeah. And we would barbecue or whatever.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was a great time, and we used to call it the White Trash Fridays. And so he and I hop in the car. Lenny drives down to Austin. We get down there. We're hanging out at the pool, and I'm waiting for Jeff to call me to tell me the address of this bar or whatever, or his hotel. I'm sorry. And he didn't call for the longest time, and it must have been like 11 o'clock, and me and Lenny are hanging out in this hotel pool, like just a hotel hot tub, just hanging out. And I'm like, I guess Jeff was full of shit, and like I suspected. All of a sudden I get a phone call, and it's Jeff, and he's like, hey Tom, Vince is coming over, come to us, and here's the address or whatever. And I'm like, all right, just text it to me or whatever. So he texted me the address, and I'm like, all right, fuck it. I'm drunk at this point, and which is no surprise because 90% of my time at that point in my life I was drunk. But I'm like, all right, fuck it. I was like, let me borrow your car. I'm gonna drive over there. And he's like, all right. So he gives me the keys to his car because he's drunk at the same time, so he doesn't know any better. Gives me the keys to his car. I drive over there, get to Jeff's hotel room, which is a suite, and I'm like, I'm expecting like a Hotel 6, you know what I mean, like a slummy like hotel, and I show up and it's a suite, like it's like multiple bedrooms. There's like a hot tub in the room. There's like a separate 2 bathrooms, like it's like a full apartment, like and better. And so I go in and I'm like, Jeff, I was like, who did you mug to get this hotel room? Because the dude lived in a 4-plex, and he's like, no, he's like, we're pooling together. We got this room because he's like, we knew Vince was coming. And I was like, you're still on with this fucking Vince nonsense. I was like, I cannot wait for this dude not to show up so I can rip you apart for the next however long I'm here. I'm like, I'm so excited about this. I'm like, bring on Vince Vaughn. Let's have it. Like, let's see Vince Vaughn. So like at this point, we continue drinking and we're waiting, and he's like, oh, Vince is on his way. And I'm like, that's what you said, a couple hours ago. And he's like, no, for real, Vince is here. He's coming or whatever. He's coming up. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then so all of a sudden the door, like I hear knocking at the door. fucking Jeff goes over to the door and he opens the door and no shit, there's like 6'8" tall Vince Vaughn like standing at the door. And I'm like, well, I'll be a son of a bitch. I was like, this dude knew Vince Vaughn. like I was picking on him for like the last year, like that he didn't know Vince Vaughn. And then dude comes in the room and they're all like, Vince. And some people are calling Vinny, Vinny. And like, it's like this chorus of people, cheering for him. And like, and then there's me, and then like my dude Jeff, he's like, who like at this point becomes my dude because I'm like, wow, this dude actually was telling the truth. So I'm like, well, I was like, well, I'll be a son of a bitch. And like Vince Vaughn comes in the room and he's like shaking everyone's hand, hugging everybody, high five, and all of a sudden he comes to me and Jeff's like, hey, this is my dude Tom. He's my neighbor. Whatever. He's in the army. We hang out all the time. Da da da. You talked to him on the phone a while back, and he's like, oh yeah. And I was like, I shook his hand. I'm like, fucking Vince Vaughn, I'll be a son of a bitch. I said, I loved you in Jurassic Park too. And like, he looked at me for the longest time, like, what the fuck are you talking about?
That's what you fucking remember.
That's like the
by?
least, like the smallest cameo role of Vince Vaughn, like at the time. And then he starts busting up laughing. He's like, and he starts laughing like I know the guy, but like at the time he thought I was being funny, but in reality that was like the only thing I could think of at the time. I was like, I loved you in Jurassic Park
Not
too.
old school.
Nothing else. It was
not dodgeball.
Nothing else. It was Jurassic Park 2, where he played like a guy number 2 on the credits. But yeah, that was my story.
It's awesome that you knew that. I didn't know he was in that.
Yeah, he was, and I just remembered because, like, I don't even remember how I remembered at the time, but I remembered him being like, Sarah Carter, and then Ian Malcolm's like, how many Sarahs do you think are on this island, or whatever, and I was like, that's all I could think of at the time was him in that particular moment when Jeff Goldblum chews him out for saying Sarah Carter or whatever. But yeah, that was the time that I partied with Vince Vaughn, and I totally got blackout drunk and I passed out. For all I know, guys, Vince Vaughn may have had a finger in me. For all I know, I may have been sexually assaulted by Vince Vaughn. I woke up the next morning, early afternoon, in that hotel suite, in the bathtub, sleeping, and I was fully clothed or whatever, but, who knows what happened with me and Vince Vaughn. Me too. Hashtag me too.
Yeah, hashtag me too. What does it say? Well, damn.
Yeah.
No, I met
That's
Freddy
a high
Krueger
note.
one time. But, that was uneventful. That was like the most uneventful thing ever. And Bruce Campbell. He was another one. If Chins Could Kill.
Ghost.
Robert Englund.
I did. I met Robert Englund one time, and I met Bruce Campbell.
Ghost.
I met Robin Williams
I
twice.
remember that.
He
I
got me
remember that.
late.
Yeah. I remember that. Well, I remember one of the times you met him.
Yeah. It's like we when we were in Iraq, they did the USO tour, and one of my warrant officers I worked for was in charge of the flight ops, faux ops or whatever, or foo ops or something like that. And I used to always bug him to get me on a helicopter because I'd never flown on one. And I met him twice. Okay, basically long story short, we got put on a security detail for the USO tour, so we got to fly around with him and Kid Rock and Loose Black and Lance Armstrong, and we got to hang out with them on Blackhawks. But that's not the best part of the story. When I was in Afghanistan, I was this autonomous sergeant driving around people from the airport back and forth in a bus, and I was trying to plow this female mechanic at the time. You know what I mean? And yeah, she was hottie. And anyways, I'd been putting in a lot of work, and so much that company commanders split us apart because I don't know, fraternization. Even though I don't know, it didn't make sense. Basically, they just didn't want me being around her because they were jealous, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, I get wind that Robin Williams is coming to Kandahar, to CAF, and she happens to fly in the same day to go on leave. So I tell her, hey, they're doing this USO thing. We should go see it. And, Robin Williams, he'll sign everybody. It's just like John Cena, man. Just like your story. He'll stay until everybody gets an autograph, even if it's 2 a.m. So we waited and waited and waited in line until we finally got to take a picture. She got to take her picture, selfie. And he pointed at my shirt and he remembered me. He remembered who I was from when we were in Iraq together doing the USO tour. And he goes, Villalobos. It was so funny because had never told her the story about how I did the security detail with him. And he just pointed at my shirt and goes, Villalobos. He's like, we were in Iraq when you did the USO tour 2 years ago when I did the USO tour. And I was like, yeah, you remember that? I was like shocked. I didn't, I wasn't going to bring it up. And she was so blown away. It was like, I remember the look on her face, man. It was like, you know this guy? like, what the hell, Anyways, that pretty much got me laid. Just that alone. Just him acknowledging my existence.
You're a guy that exists. The thing about Robin Williams is I honestly don't care about 99.99% of celebrities that die. The exception to that was Robin Williams when he died, and I don't know why it hit me so hard, but it was when it happened, it was just a few years ago, but when it happened, I was like, wow. I was like, I don't know why it hit me so hard, and then I thought about it, and I'm like, man, that dude was like us. Like he's like us. Well, he's like a much funnier version of us, but he was like the funny guy in the group, and like of his group of friends, which his group of friends was just the world. Like he was the funny guy that you turn to, that you look to for a laugh, and I was like, man, if depression or if like suicidal tendencies or suicidal thoughts are plaguing like the guy that you go to for that sort of thing, I was like, it can hit anyone, and it was like very insightful, and I was like, man,
I agree with that.
And
I agree with you.
That's when I realized, like the old expression, who watches the watchman, like who guards the guards, who looks after the funny guy, like who brightens the day of the funny guy, like who, that's when you gotta, so that's
oddly profound.
There's a lesson to be learned today from this episode. If you had me at Slenderman.
Jameis, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I've been practicing guitar while listening to stories. Do you guys want to hear my favorite celebrity story real quick?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that's what we were doing.
One time I was at home in Judah, Wisconsin, and this guy came to our house, my family's house, along with his friend. And you know who the guys were? They were the guys from True Facts and Prank Night, the Prank Night videos from YouTube. I met those guys.
The way you told that story made me think it was going to be a joke, so I already started laughing. I thought you were going to be like, you know who they were? And then say like Steve Martin or some like.
It ended up being you and me, so it was like a huge down.
Do you want to hear my celebrity story?
Tom and Dustin celebrity story.
So, let me set the stage. It was 120 degrees.
He's going to tell a story about, so there I was in Judah, Wisconsin, and these two guys from True Facts showed up. Wait, isn't that James's story?
120 degrees.
I just realized that you were talking about us. It took me so long to realize that he was talking about us.
V came with me on leave one time. He did. That's what James is talking about.
120 degrees in Africa. Africa, I said. Matthew Lillard. What's that say?
All right, tell your story.
Okay.
Play the song, please.
Play the song, Davis.
Please.
It was 120 degrees in Africa. I was in the QRF compound. QRF stands for Quick Reaction Force.
I was hoping you wouldn't remember what it stood for.
Come walking in was Robert Patrick. You know Robert Patrick. He played the colonel in the unit.
I thought this was about Matthew Lillard.
And then Matthew Lillard come walking in behind me. And all the girls were going crazy.
And Dustin was going crazy.
The Dustin was going crazy. The girls took a picture with Matthew Lillard, and this is what he said.
He said, Dustin, put your penis away.
I can't take these pictures and let my wife see these pictures. But he did it anyways.
And he just asked that we Photoshop out Dustin's penis.
Peyton Manning came one time.
You don't have to. You can't even see it.
You can't see it.
Burn.
Nice.
Sick burn.
You can zoom.